So I'm super excited that we actually, well, I should do Q&A at the end, so you already know, you can already prepare. So yeah, I'm very excited that I can do the session with you, Clara. So Clara, to me, is probably the perfect politician. I don't know many of your caliber because Clara has actually started a company before, worked for Rocket Internet all over the world. You've led Station F for a long time, and now you're one of the world's first AI ministers at the age of 35. So how did you get to where you are today? What was the path, and did you always know that you were going to take it?
It's a great question. I don't think I ever portrayed myself as a politician, but I do remember one moment in particular which probably helps define where I am today and why I'm here. I got the chance to study in the US, and we were discussing a case about innovation. This was during my MBA time. And one of my American colleagues in that classroom said, I was just talking about something about how Europe is doing this or that for innovation. And so this guy, friend of mine, very nicely said, like, well, I don't think you should talk about innovation because you're European. And that really drove me nuts. And that moment on, I really thought I have to do something about that. I have to do something about that narrative. I have to do something with my time to contribute to making Europe a great place for innovation. And so initially, the way I did that was with what I knew what to do. So I moved back to Europe, joined a startup in the UK, and then moved back to my home country eventually to be part of what was getting built there from a business perspective. But that was not enough. And then the second moment, I think, was one of those days, and I'm sure a lot of people in the room have had those days, where you're waking up, whatever, 6 a.m., and you're looking at your sales revenues, and you're like, oh my God, we need to do more, we need to grow faster, we need to go further. And I thought to myself, I actually don't really want that anymore. I don't want to spend my time just selling stuff to people. I want to do something which has a much bigger impact. And I think that's when I realized the way to contribute to that and the way to contribute to the booming French ecosystem was to go on the other side.
Yeah, that's great. And we didn't talk about this before, but I know you also have 2 kids. I also have 2 kids. We talked about this briefly. To what extent do they play a role? Because for me personally, it is very important to what I do with Visionaries tomorrow. Does it play a role for you as well?
Definitely. Every time I get a chance to do what I do, I think about the future we want to build for our continent, and obviously the future we want to build for our kids. And on a more personal note, that's also something that has been very important for me as a woman. When I got asked to join the government, I was 8 months pregnant, so very pregnant. And obviously, like when something like that happens, you're like, okay, what do I do now? And part of the reason I went on is obviously because this is a unique opportunity, and if you want to have an impact on your country, there's nothing else you can do that has such an impact. But also because I thought if I can contribute to show that women can take leadership roles whenever they are in their career, in their personal life. Obviously not all women should do that, that's not at all what I'm saying, but if you want it, and that's also something that has been very important for me when we're thinking of building tech in Europe. If we want more women in tech, if we want more women in leadership position, if we want more women CEOs, and I can contribute to shape that story from this personal angle, I had to do it.
And to what extent do you think your entire journey so far, your entrepreneurial journey, to what extent has that influenced how you think about AI and AI policy?
Huge influence. I mean, just bouncing back on the woman thing, I was in SF for a few weeks, a few months now ago. It was a gathering of what we call the AI Safety Institutes, and the US was taking the lead on that topic back then. And I met with this scientist, amazing woman, who's been working on AI for so long, and she showed me this picture. She basically asked ChatGPT, like, oh, based on all our interaction, can you draw a picture of me in my life? And on that picture, on the left hand, she was there in her kitchen with her 3 kids, baking something. and then on the right end of the picture, she was there in her job. Like, so there is like a blackboard, and you can see she's a scientist. There are like stuff everywhere, mathematic formulas, whatever. But she's a man. And that's like what I think is the most striking example of how technology is just a tool, and the way you build this tool has to be aligned with your values. And obviously the value of inclusivity, the value of making sure that we use tech for the greater good is something that I've been passionate for so long.
Let's actually use that as a great segue to the AI Action Summit, which when it happened here in Paris for the last day. So you also played a very important role in that, and we've also all read the news. You know, I think for Europe, it's amazing that there were lots of pledges. The 109 billion from the French government. You know, then there's the AI champions pledging 150 billion. How do you look at that? Is that the most important outcome for you, or what was the most important outcome of the AI Action Summit?
I think the very first thing we thought when it came to organizing this summit after the one in the UK in Bletchley and after the one in Seoul was to think, okay, AI is shaping our world as we speak. What is the responsibility of government in this conversation? And our president, Emmanuel Macron, from the very beginning, he actually started something with Justin Trudeau in 2018 called GPIA, Global Partnership on AI, with the same idea being, of course, safety is important because guaranteeing safety is guaranteeing trust, and trust will drive adoption, and we need people to adopt this technology, but it's not enough. We looked at the summit thinking, how do we drive the conversation towards opportunities and not just risks? And I think this is absolutely fundamental in the way government should approach it, because if we want to make sure, going back to the question of inclusivity, if we want to make sure that everyone can benefit from this technology, we have a huge role to play. And that's why, under the leadership of our president, we decided to gather people who are not just country heads, leaders, talking about AI and regulation, but going much beyond that, thinking how do we gather scientists from all over the world, companies, but also obviously government heads to shape how we want this technology to be developed for the world. And that's extremely important. I mean, and obviously, if you want to have a voice in the conversation, you need to be on top of the game. So that was also for us a way to accelerate the national AI strategy that we've been pushing for so long, since 2018 now, looking at how we invest in talent, looking at how we invest in infrastructure. We have green energy thanks to nuclear. This is a huge competitive edge for us. So the 109 billion investments that our president unveiled is going in that direction of using this competitive edge. Looking how we move forward, getting AI into administrations. But all of that was also necessary because this is giving us a voice to have a leadership into the conversation of what AI should be used for.
Yeah, we actually we heard from Demis and Dario earlier, who were also talking about the risks of AI. Then we were also hearing from Eric in the morning, who said that, well, risk, that's something that he only hears from Europeans. And I wanted to talk to you about the AI Act anyway, so might as well do that now, because you know, as an investor and also as a founder, we hear lots of criticism, and I think, you know, from my point of view, there's some truth to it, where Europe has a tendency of over-regulating early on, where we're front-loading regulation instead of having innovation kind of run its course and then correcting afterwards. How do you see the AI Act? How do you see the outcome also of the AI Action Summit, where I think it was actually Macron who also said, we will make changes, we have to deregulate. Could you be a bit more specific? Could you try to give examples of where that deregulation could come in and what that means for the EU AI Act?
I'll start with the AI Act, and then I'll move on to what Europe had to say about AI in the last few days, because we're very excited about all the announcements that were made. I think we need to be a little careful on where this conversation on regulation is going, and not forget that the idea that Europe regulates also serves some companies' interests. Because, yeah, when you come to Europe, you have a set of rules to respect, and that's not bad per se. I think that's aligned with who we are as Europeans. I mean, the fact that, what does the AI Act say? It basically says you have different types of use cases. In Europe, we don't want, as European, that AI is used to give you a social rating. We just don't want that. That's not the society we want to build. We don't want AI using emotions. Well, honestly, I'm really proud as a European that we're like putting down this type of rules. I don't think that's bad. Where it gets very important is that in the implementation of those regulations, and I can say that because I've had to put some regulation in place when I was an entrepreneur before in my life, like GDPR. I'm sure a lot of people in this room love GDPR. So when it comes to implementation is when we need to be very careful, very, very careful that we don't slow down innovation. It's not the objective of the regulation itself, it's really the application. And that's been a huge focus of my team, making sure we work hand in hand with the European Union and how this regulation actually gets implemented. But let's not be too, let's not have too much of a tendency to like put everything in one bag and say, okay, regulation is bad. I think it's a little bit more nuanced, and we should also understand what's behind that. But going back to your question, I mean, yeah, of course, hearing Europe talking about competitiveness, talking about cutting red tape, talking about how do we spend more time thinking on how we're building industry leaders is a huge success and something we're very pleased to hear. And that was part of the whole objective of the summit, not to talk just about regulation and safety, and I think we've done that well. When Ursula von der Leyen yesterday announced 200 billion euros going into AI at European level, I mean, this is far from being ridiculous. Europe is definitely here. I hear a lot about like, oh, Europe should wake up, and when is Europe going to listen? Europe has woken up.
We made it a big theme of Unplugged to say we're doubling down on Europe. So lots of people may say Europe is dead, but we actually think the opposite. So we definitely,
I think too.
Yeah, we definitely applauded what was going on there. I just wanted to get, say, a bit more clarity when talking about the EU AI Act. If you could rewrite something, what would it be? What are the things that you're not fond of when it comes to the Act?
I don't think it's a question of rewriting anything, because I know the conversation went on for so long, and finding the right balance was not something easy. And we did find that balance. I mean, the way the Act itself is written, it's perfectly fine. We're saying stuff like, okay, transparency and business secret protection should be balanced. I mean, all of that is there. I think what really matters now is really, again, how we implement it and where we should be really careful. But if we look at it, and I think that's a big thing that Europe needs to change, by the way. If we look at it on the positive side, this regulation is also a competitive advantage for companies if done well, and we have to strike it well. But if done well, it means that French, German, whatever, European, Italian, Spanish, you name it, company in Europe will have the same regulation expanding to all 27 countries. And that's a huge competitive advantage. We have 400 million people. And we often tend to forget that. We think as Europe as like this, I think someone in one of the panel yesterday said this big monster. But Europe is a powerful house. This is how we should, think about it. And I think it's our collective responsibility as well to see what's our strengths, maybe be a little more proud of what we have, because that's not something we're very good at doing. As European, we prefer to be very humble, sometimes a little bit negative. But we have everything we need. We have talents, we have energy, we have financing. We just need to aim big.
That actually already answers one question I also had, because you went to Silicon Valley lately. I did want to ask you what you think as Europe we should double down on, what are the strengths that we should keep on strengthening. So I think that part of the question is answered. You also mentioned talent and you mentioned energy. Could we quickly talk about those two very important elements for AI? So keeping talent from leaving on the one hand, and then the other important factor which goes into AI is energy. We backed a company called Proxima Fusion, so a fusion company. How do you see energy and energy supply from a governmental perspective?
On talents, I mean, every conference I go to, I find French people. And I don't think that's because the organizer wants to please me. I think that's because of the amazing talent ecosystem we have here in this country, based on obviously our higher education, the ranking we have in our universities when it comes to math. And that's a treasure. I mean, we obviously need, and that's what the government has been doing. We just announced we're putting 360 million euro more into this type of training. There's no AI if you don't have scientists. We have some of the best scientists in the world. We actually have more scientists working on AI in Europe than anywhere else in the world. And so we need to treasure that. But honestly, I'm happy when they move around. I mean, I've spent 10 years abroad, and I think that makes me a better human being, like really. I've seen so many different countries. I've seen so many different ways of thinking. There's no better way to expand your thinking. So we should not fall into that trap thinking, oh my God, this engineer moved to whatever country in the world. Great for them. But what we need to make sure is that when they want to start companies, they're moving back. And we're seeing a lot of that. I think in Germany you have amazing founders. You had them all on stage today. In France we have amazing one as well, coming back to France to start their companies. And this is great. And we need to have more of that. And to answer your question on energy, I'll just have 3 words. Plug, baby, plug.
Nice. All right. So officially we can't do Q&A anymore. Maybe we'll do one quick question, and then you have to run. So one question, whoever has a question. Otherwise, I have a few more. All right, maybe you could just show your hand if you want to ask a question. Or Tilly, you have a question, maybe. All right, yeah, lots of questions over here. But it has to be a quick one. And a quick answer.
Very quick, sorry. Do you have 26 colleagues in every European country?
I do. I've met them a lot this week. And yeah, that's an important question, actually. We've met in different informal setups. We're also obviously meeting in formal setups everywhere. Not everyone has AI in their title, but don't worry, I'm speaking to them about AI all the time.
All right. I know you have to move on. So thank you, Clara, so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks for the question.